Human Torch is the strongest flyer in Marvel Rivals and arguably the best DPS in the game, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Due to his ability to adapt to any situation that could be thrown his way, he is an absolute menace and one of the most fun heroes I've played in any hero shooter. Since Human Torch's release, I've clocked over 100 hours on the hero and I have reached Eternity last season with a staggering 75% win rate on the hero. This will be a more in-depth guide, but I do pride myself in making things very digestible for new players and players of just any skill level, so be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe for more Human Torch content in the future. As stated before, this is a more in-depth guide from someone with over 100 hours on this hero alone, but we do have to cover the basics of his kit before we move on to all the intricacies later on in this video. Even if you do understand what Human Torch does, I highly recommend you still pay attention because there are some misconceptions revolving around this kit, and I get some niche insight into each one of them that you won't find anywhere else. In order to play Human Torch at a high level, you must understand his primary attack being Fire Cluster. Human Torch has 6 rounds of his left click in which he shoots a shotgun-like blast that recharges over time. This attack is considered a projectile, so the time it takes to travel through the air is incredibly important to consider. The Fire Cluster also has spread as well as some pretty steep damage drop-off after 15 meters. This attack is the pitfall for a lot of new Human Torch players because it is admittedly very hard to use when you're first picking a hero up. If the damage fall off and spread weren't bad enough, you also blow through these 6 rounds very quickly and you can find yourself confused on what to do until they do recharge. The single best thing to alleviate this feeling of uncomfortability after you run out of ammo is to animation cancel your left click with your melee. When you left click and then immediately melee, your ammo instantly recharges, completely mitigating that drawback of the reload. My recommendations for melee binds is to put them on your mouse since you will be doing this animation cancel quite habitually. Another important thing to consider with Torch's left click is the placement of your shots. Marvel Rivals is a game where the shots don't go exactly where your reticle is, and on Human Torch specifically, the shots come from his hands. What this means is you have to be very intentional with where you place your shots. You typically want your target to be in between Human Torch's body and the reticle for the most consistent shots possible. Once you master not just shooting and leading your shots, but placing your shots in a certain spot, taking all of these things into account, you'll be quite unstoppable on this hero. What you'll notice a lot throughout this guide is that this is a hero that you have to be very intentional with in order to extract the maximum amount of value out of him. This is very good for whoever's watching because the time you put into Torch and the passion you have for the character really shows in how you play. When you've truly mastered the hero, it's very hard not to notice. Blazing Blast is Torch's right click in which he throws a fireball that does 40 impact damage and remains on the ground for 6 seconds. Each charge refreshes after 3 seconds, and once they're on the ground, they do 20 damage per second. Human Torch has 3 charges of Blazing Blast, and the maximum amount you can have on the floor is 4 at the moment. Due to how quickly Torch used to charge his right click, the maximum used to be 5, but that's no longer in the game. This ability is the most important in Human Torch's kit because it has the most synergy with the rest of his kit, and it allows for multiple strong combos when set up correctly. As a standalone ability, Blazing Blast is great for zoning off specific areas of the map that you either want to threaten or just use for some insurance in case you need to be aware of someone passing through it. I often find myself placing a right click on a common flank route, so when an enemy passes through it, I get a hit marker, essentially alerting me of their flank before they actually make a move. Pyro Prison is the main ability you will be comboing with the previous ability we covered being Blazing Blast. Upon casting your E, a firewall will link between your right clicks and create a barrier, burning anyone inside of it for 50 damage per second over 5 seconds, and the walls themselves do 65 damage. On every map, there will be neutral space leading to the objective, or the neutral space itself will be the objective. Each team has to fight for this space in order to progress and win the match, and that essentially forces them to play inside of your Pyro Prison if you set it up correctly. If you can set up a good prison on an objective and a fight breaks out, that compounding damage over 5 seconds will do wonders for your team and you'll be more likely to win that fight quickly. As I mentioned before, this ability is the main combo with your right click, so it is important to have a good grasp of both of these abilities. In my opinion, it's no longer worth it to make a square with your Pyro Prison if you don't have to. Not only is it incredibly risky due to how long it takes to set up, but a lot of the times you'll get the same amount of value by just making a triangle with it. Another thing to note is that this ability is absolutely insane for farming your ultimate ability quickly. Supports like Loki, Cloak and Dagger, and Luna will always have their support ultimates faster than you have yours, so there's really no reason not to use the Pyro Prison on cooldown in fear of charging support ultimates. Another niche tip with Pyro Prison is that it extends the duration of your Blazing Blast, making them more threatening over time. Flaming Meteor is yet another ability that combos with Human Torch's right click, and this is hands down the singular most oppressive ability in his kit. It's absolutely insane. Upon casting, Human Torch will dive to the ground at a staggering 80 meters per second, doing 40 damage as well as detonating any Blazing Blast or Flame Fields for 55 damage each. What this means is, if you set up a smaller flame field within 5 meters of where Torch is landing, he can instantly detonate that flame field, having each right click do 55 damage. The detonations themselves are only 3 meters, so it is important to set them up as close to 5 meters as possible so that the widest area gets affected by all of the damage. This ability is absolutely insane because it can one-shot almost any support ult in the game if you set it up correctly. The normal game plan for this ability as a standalone is to use it as a finisher on enemies. You almost never want to initiate a duel with it unless you're absolutely sure you can win, and even then it's kind of bad practice to do so. Something very important about this ability is that it is on a staggering 20-second cooldown. You need to understand when these developers make these cooldowns insanely long, they're essentially telling you that the ability is really strong. Knowing that, you have to be very careful with how you use it because I am telling you, this is one of the strongest DPS abilities in the game. If the one-shot ability wasn't enough, this is also one of the strongest boops in the game. You can knock people back insanely far, and if you don't outright one-shot them, there are a lot of instances in which you can just secure kills by booping them off the map. Plasma Body is Human Torch's shift in which he enters a state of faster flight. Torch moves 50% faster and is on a resource that recharges over time when drained. Human Torch doesn't have a true passive, but this ability is the closest thing to it, and it makes him feel a lot better to play. When combo with his left click and melees, his Plasma Body makes him extremely hard to hit to the point where a hit scan isn't even much of an issue for you. Now for Human Torch's ultimate ability, things get a bit insane. Upon casting, Human Torch will enter an awoken state that lasts 8 seconds and turns his right clicks into huge fire tornadoes. When activated, Torch emits a shockwave of 75 damage to everything in a 20-meter radius of him and receives an insane 30% damage reduction for the entire duration of the ultimate. The fire tornadoes themselves are 3 meters wide and 8 meters high in a cone shape and do a crazy 110 damage per second. You can only have 3 of these tornadoes out at a time, and their individual damage does stack together when you line them up on top of each other. This can easily one-shot any support ultimate in the game in under a few seconds if they're careless and don't move around to avoid them. It's always good to have a decent Pyro Prison set up before you pop your ultimate because it's just an insane amount of AoE damage and zoning that just accumulates very quickly. Now that we've covered most of the nuances of his abilities, let me know if you're enjoying the video so far, and if I've helped you in any way, drop a like for the algorithm. With that being said, let's get back into the playstyle and mentality that you'll need to have in order to play Human Torch well. Human Torch is a very interesting hero because the only real hard counter to a Human Torch is going to be another Human Torch. In high elo and even professional play, Human Torch is either picked or banned in almost every single game, which is absolutely insane considering how difficult he can be to use. He's one of those heroes that really rewards you for the time spent on learning him and his matchups, I can't lie. What makes him this pick or ban character is his ability to do absolutely everything in the game at a high level. He can literally poke, dive, flank, peel, and just by virtue of him being a perma flyer, he's automatically good at off-angling. Knowing what to do on this hero and when to do it is what separates lower level Torch players and the pros. Although he has crazy 1v1 potential, it's not always optimal to force those 1v1s, especially early on in team fights. The main focus for a Human Torch in the early to mid fight should just be staying alive while outputting the most amount of pressure possible. Human Torch is one of those heroes that forces everyone in the game to play around him, so the value you get by just staying alive in the developmental stages of the fight has a crazy impact on the outcome. Going for these crazy assassinations and one-shots early on in the fight is almost never worth it unless you have someone that's dedicated to helping you pull that play off, such as an Ultron with his drone on you and a right click or something. Understanding when to make that play is what's going to allow you to hyper carry games with little resistance at all. There are times where you do need to put yourself in a lot of risk to pull off a crazy play, and once you understand where you need to be and when, your mechanical skill on the hero can and will carry you. My personal favorite way to play Torch is to kind of bait people into taking isolated 1v1s with me. There will be a time in every team fight where you'll just be focusing fire down a choke and or just shooting tanks in order to take a stronger position as a team. While doing that, you should be moving from cover to cover and taking stronger power positions that force the enemy team to either pay attention to you or just die. What this allows you to do is divert attention from your team so they have an easier time walking up and they don't have to invest as many cooldowns to take space. You're essentially doing the job of a tank for them by making these crazy off-angle plays and opening up the map for your entire team to work with. What playing like this also does is it kind of forces the enemy DPS into a mind game of, oh, am I safe playing here with that torch up there? And if the answer is yes, the enemy team will continue playing the position that they assume is just quote unquote safe, and you can forcibly pressure them out or even one-shot them. If the enemy DPS don't think the position they're playing is safe with you on that off angle, they might just be inclined to hard focus their attention on either committing to the 1v1 with you or just trying to suppress you and poke you out. This is really good because with how Torch's left click falls off after 15 meters, them coming to flush you out themselves is more favorable for you the closer they get. You're essentially taking the fight on your terms, and they genuinely may think that they have a chance to win, in which they have no shot if your mechanics are slightly good. You know, luring people into 1v1s is incredibly strong because not only does it waste their time, but the odds of them winning are slim to none, and yet oftentimes they take the duel anyway. It's crazy. I've been maining Echo and just flyers in general on Overwatch for years, and Human Torch is so much like Echo, and the fact that they're both absolute 1v1 demons if you set them up correctly by using, decent positioning and understanding the trading of cooldowns that has to happen in a duel. One thing you may find yourself struggling with are counter picks. There are so many Human Torch counters in the game that make it past the bans that there's oftentimes quite literally 6 of them in the game at once. When talking about counter picks, things like hit scan come to mind, and this is a really interesting topic when it comes to Human Torch because I'm under the belief that hit scan is not really an issue for Human Torch. I've played within the top 1% lobbies against literal ex Overwatch pros known for their hit scan abilities, and I genuinely don't believe it's that much of an issue. Whether that just means Torch is overtuned or not is up for debate, but as long as you know how to play cover to cover and use your plasma body along with your melee weaving correctly, you will be just fine against hit scan. One hero in particular that may seem like an issue is a good Spider-Man. He kind of forces you to play lower to the ground and around your supports because the threat of him just one-tapping you without your supports looking up is there for sure. If you're aware of this and just play a slower, more field-focused Torch, you can easily 2-tap a Spider-Man no matter how good they are. I will have a matchup chart on the screen for potential heroes to look out for, but take it with a grain of salt because these are just my personal opinions and what I would be worried about in my games. Now I'm going to rapid fire some niche tips that I don't see talked about anywhere else. Human Torch is what I consider to be a rhythm character, and the rhythm of shooting, meleeing, and holding your shift, as well as aiming in between is a skill that can absolutely be mastered. I personally find it easier to hit my shots on Torch when I'm actively doing the melee tech as opposed to just spamming left clicks and waiting for them to recharge. Another great tip for Human Torch's left click is that you shouldn't always do the melee tech. There's situations in which the benefits you get from melee weaving aren't needed and do nothing but slightly lower your DPS. I personally don't melee tech until I've used a couple of left clicks to ensure that I can do the maximum amount of damage in a short amount of time if I need to. Going for one-shots on support ultimates is often a waste of time because it takes a while to set up and it is very easy to miss. With that being said, it is still extremely good when you can get it to work, and to do so, you need to space out the blazing blast a little bit to ensure that the detonation is wide enough to have a real effect. Stacking the right clicks in one singular spot is not the way to go here. Understanding who's targeting you on the enemy team is huge because you can use their tunnel vision to your advantage by luring them into bad positions and punishing them. Using the invisible woman team up right before you get into an engagement is really good because you still gain the benefit of shields over time if you do take damage, so you essentially have free insta heals if you get hit hard enough. Dropping a thing on the enemy team's backline activates the earthbound effect where he lands, and they won't be able to use any escape cooldowns. If thing ults right after this, the enemies will be knocked up literally in your face for some free one-shots. Human Torch's team-ups are absolutely insane for the hero, and they're some of the most underrated team-ups in the game, I can't lie. Popping your ultimate as soon as a blazing blast is about to hit the ground instantly creates a fire tornado, really catching people off guard since they're taking a crazy amount of damage in the blink of an eye. Popping your ultimate draws a lot of attention towards you, so it's a great idea to put all three on yourself and to just hide inside of it sometimes. This is really good for heroes that thrive in a close range, and they'll almost certainly die very quickly if they decide to ego you in your ultimate. This is insanely good for the Spider-Man players who know that they can one-shot you in the air and kinda just tunnel vision you when you pop your ultimate. Understanding your team comp will help you win games long before you enter the first team fight. Knowing what your comp enables you to do can lead to crazy steamrolls if you know how to use your teammates' cooldowns effectively. A great example of this is knowing which positions to play if you have an Ultron drone or a Luna Snowflake. With a Luna Flake, you can kinda just do whatever and like semi play off of health packs, but with Ultron drone, not only do you have to be within 30 meters of Ultron himself, but you need to maintain line of sight with Ultron's body. Left clicking in between fire tornadoes is great for damage and is the most underrated tech in Human Torch's kit. There are literally no downsides, and the advantage of the free extra damage you get is insane. Now these were just some spitball tips that I think you should definitely consider when playing Human Torch. Again, I've played this hero alone for over 100 hours at a pretty high level, but if I did miss anything at all, please help each other out in the comments. I like to emphasize the fact that I'm not a guide content creator that just farms engagement by learning surface level things on the hero. I genuinely do play these heroes for a while before I make these guides, so I hope that with this guide, some of my experience did pay off. But that is going to do it for this one. I am planning on learning Captain America next, so once I feel comfortable, I would like to share what I've learned after about 100 hours or so, or just reach an eternity again. But with that being said, take care of yourselves and good luck. Peace.